All right, so great to have the first paper on the importance of minority loan officers, and our second paper is on the importance of minority-owned banks. And so the next presenter is Scott Langford from UNC, and the floor is yours.
Oh, perfect. Sorry. I'm sorry. There was a clicker. Wonderful. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Scott Langford. I'm at Arizona State University. And this afternoon, I will be talking to you about a paper we've been working to develop titled Let Us Put Our Monies Together, Minority-Owned Banks and Resilience to Crises. So I've been working with Alan Berger, Marianne Feldman, and Raluca Roman to develop this project. And so this project is really the application of a novel lending technology we called shared identity to a specific case, so minority-owned banks within the United States. And so shared identity is really an extension of a concept we're familiar with, relationship lending. And it may serve as either a complement or a substitute to relationship lending. However, it doesn't require the time and labor-intensive processes of relationship lending where you're spending time getting to know a customer, you have these repeat interactions. And it's really based on the idea that you have groups of folks that have shared experiences. And so they sort of immediately when someone walks into a bank branch, they can more effectively and efficiently communicate. You can more effectively collect and process soft information, and that is helpful to the lender and the borrower. And so the particular case we consider here are minority-owned banks and minority workers in the United States. Forward. Perhaps. Okay, so a little bit about shared identity. So again, we're all familiar with relationship lending, this traditional process or technology where we acquire and process soft information from borrowers without sufficiently high quality hard information when that's not available. And so here we're introducing another concept or new lending technology we call shared identity. And so this may either serve as a substitute or a complement for relationship lending. Again, it doesn't require this labor or time-intensive information gathering through repeated contact over time as relationship lending does. And it may be collected, or it's helpful in collecting information the moment a borrower walks into a bank. And this is really based on the collective experience of groups of people with a shared identity over time. And this differs from relationship lending where information accumulates with repeated contact between a lender and a borrower over time. And here, a loan officer or other bank employee may better screen and monitor borrowers with the same identity. And we think of the soft information such as trustworthiness, and this may be communicated better through soft information, either verbally or non-verbally. These communication techniques are really hard for us to measure, but we know are there. And that was on the lender side. On the borrower side, it may be that borrowers with a shared identity are less likely to strategically default due to the fear of losing community capital or reputation. And this may be particularly important for members of the community who are not always best served by the banking system. So here we're considering the case of racial or ethnic minorities in the United States who may be subject to various forms of discrimination. This may also apply to other groups of folks. We can think of folks that may be discriminated against on the basis of religion, immigration status, national origin, both within the United States, but also in other nations as well. And so this shared identity may mitigate racial disparities in employment, and these are particularly important through economic crises, so through the global financial crisis as well as the COVID-19 crisis. Now, there's plenty of literature on minority-owned banks, but we are unaware of any papers or anybody advancing this particular view. So you may have seen my title or our title and thought that there was a typo in our title, and that's not quite the case. So our paper is partially based on or inspired by a quote from Maggie Lena Walker. Maggie Lena Walker was the first African-American woman bank president in the United States. And the quote that inspires this research is, "Let us put our monies together, let us put our money out at usury among ourselves and reap the benefit ourselves." And so here, Maggie Lena Walker is really advocating a bit of a moral argument, right, for minority-owned banks. And here, we're trying to play the role of steely-eyed, objective economists in seeing our minority-owned banks really improving their local economies and really making them more efficient or more effective. So to preview our results a little bit, what are our key findings? Minority-owned banks work. So we find that minority-owned banks mitigate employment losses through the global financial crisis as well as the COVID-19 crisis. These effects are observed both for minorities and non-minorities. And we see that the shared minority or shared identity is less effective during COVID-19. This may be due to the lack of personal interactions, crucial to this soft information. So this is perhaps less surprising if we think about relationships are less effective via Zoom, right? I think we can all attest to that a bit. So we also see a bit of a negative impact during normal times, and this is actually somewhat consistent with what we understand about relationship lending, and that it serves as more of a smoothing mechanism for local firms and economies. So in our analysis, we consider what is the mechanism here. And so we see that small business lending and the household credit supply is maintained in minority-owned banks relative to other banks. And we argue that these effects are economically significant. So what are our contributions to the literature? So in terms of relationship lending, we expand this concept or advance it a bit, and we argue that shared identity could serve as complement or a substitute. We demonstrate that minority-owned banks strengthen economic resilience through crises, so they mitigate employment losses through crises. We advance our understanding of minority-owned banks by demonstrating or suggesting a new technology for these banks. And one of the important points we raised is that there are positive effects for both minorities and non-minorities. Finally, we test minority-owned banks in the context of finance growth nexus literature. And so we don't really see a significant economic growth role in normal times. We're not suggesting that there is no positive effect of minority-owned banks, but our analyses aren't showing that. This, again, of course, suggests the need for further research. So, a little bit of background. Over our time period, we see that minority-owned banks are increasing. This is driven by Hispanic and Asian-owned banks. This is a map of the location of minority-owned banks in the United States, concentrated in population centers and areas with a high proportion of minority residents. To our analysis. So first, we have two sets of analyses here. In the first model, we do a county level model, and this estimates the effect of minority-owned banks on economic growth. We measure using year-over-year change of employment. So our dependent variable is that employment growth, and our independent variables are minority-owned bank market share, as well as interacted with global financial crisis and COVID-19. First set of results. So this is showing, so what do we see here? We see that minority-owned banks through global financial crises have a positive impact on employment. So they're mitigating employment losses. We see this for the global financial crisis and COVID-19. We see that the strongest effects are in minority employment. However, we also see that there are positive effects on non-minority employment or white employment. We see that if we limit our sample to smaller banks, our results are consistent. For the academics out here, there's some instrumental variables that we use. So we use minority ancestry as an instrument here. Our results hold. So then we ask the question, what is the underlying mechanism? What is causing these communities to do better? And so here we're considering bank level, or several analyses, but at the bank level. And our dependent variable is the small business lending or mortgage approval and originations. Independent variable is minority-owned bank indicator, as well as that interacted with global financial crisis and COVID-19 crisis. And so the basic idea here is, are minority-owned banks lending at higher rates through these crises? So first set of results, we see that they are. We see that minority-owned banks are continuing to lend at higher rates. We also see that minority-owned banks are lending at higher rates within communities that have a higher proportion of minority residents. Second, we're able to split the small business lending by loan size, and we see that these results are really driven by the smallest of loan sizes. And so this is consistent with what we understand from the literature, that small business lending works through small loans. Soft information works through small loans. And so this is consistent with our argument that this shared identity is working through soft information. So prior results, we're looking at small business lending. We also examine what are the impacts for home mortgages. And so we see that minority-owned banks are continuing to lend as well through home mortgages at higher rates through the crises, looking at approvals and originations. Also, we see, so with this data, we can look at minority households at the loan level. Are they getting approved at higher rates? And we're seeing that they're getting approved at higher rates through these crises as well. So what is the takeaway? Maggie Leaner Walker was right. She was correct. Minority-owned banks strengthen economic resilience through economic downturns. For both the global financial crisis as well as the COVID-19 crisis, the strongest effects are really on minorities. However, they also increase economic resilience for non-minorities as well. Again, we see a weaker effect through COVID-19, but this is consistent with our expectation that they're working through relationship lending, and this was they were less able to do this through COVID-19. We also see this small negative effect through normal times, but this is perhaps indicative of smoothing. We were also able to examine the mechanism, and we see that these minority-owned banks are continuing to lend through crises at higher rates. They're doing this with their smallest of loans, consistent with a soft information mechanism. And they're also doing this not only in small businesses, but also in home mortgages. So what would I also like you to take home here? The shared identity concept may have implications for bank lending behavior and the broader economy, as well as implications beyond the US lending landscape. So there may be dimensions beyond race or ethnicity. We can think about religion, immigration status, national origin that could apply to banks not only in the US, but worldwide. And this shared identity could be powerful in unleashing positive economic benefits to the entire community. So thank you for listening. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to talk to me or let us know. Thank you.